Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one almost every week. I'm Susan Merriman. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Communications with Ohio Health, and I'm honored to serve on CMC's Board of Trustees. For those of you joining us by live stream, we're coming to you from the Ellis in Columbus's historic Italian village. So welcome, everyone. If you scan the QR codes on your tables, you may learn more about today's forum, take a short survey, and see the many organizations that support your not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Speaking of supporters, we are so grateful to the presenting sponsor of this two-part forum series, the Columbus Foundation, and the sponsor of today's forum, the American Electric Power Foundation. And thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And thank you to the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a village, so let's thank everyone for their support. Today we continue our two-part CMC series, unpacking the all-new Columbus Foundation Community Benchmarking Report. This report is available on the Columbus Foundation website that you can download it if you haven't, and it has measured how Central Ohio compares to more than 20 peer regions across more than 50 metrics. The findings dive into 5 categories: population vitality, economic strength, personal prosperity, lifelong learning, and community well-being. With today's experts, we'll reflect on the report's findings in personal prosperity, lifelong learning, and community well-being. So it's now my great honor to welcome our distinguished panelists. Please welcome J. Avery Frost, Executive Director of the Central Ohio African American Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Gina Ginn, CEO of Columbus Early Learning Center, Matt Martin, Director of Community Research for the Columbus Foundation, and Matt's back with us this week. He was here last week too, so thanks for being here. And then also returning to CMC, Autumn Glover, Senior Vice President of Provider and Community Partnerships and Health, and she will be moderating our panel today. Autumn?
Thank you, Susan. And all right, you guys ready to get into this thing? Yes. I'm excited. There's so much here, and you don't have to be a researcher to understand this or care about it. And so I'm really excited for us to learn from our experts. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. For those of you who weren't here last week, though, I thought we'd start first with you, Matt. I'm wondering if you can explain to our audience, what is this benchmarking Central Ohio study, and why was it done at the MSA level?
Yeah, well, Susan did a pretty good job of teeing that up. Hello again, everyone. The benchmarking report is a comprehensive set of indicators that covers population, economy, health outcomes for the Columbus metropolitan statistical area and 22 other metros. This is the 8th edition since 2007 that we've published, and we do this on a regular basis to help guide and inform grant making, but also investments, policies, initiatives of our community partners, and really to make sure that we're paying attention to both the strengths but also the challenges of our region, so that we can take collective action and do the things that we need to do to care about the region.
Awesome. I'm wondering, Matt, if you might follow up, if any of you have had a chance to look at the report. Sometimes when we say Columbus, we think Franklin County only, but what is the area that our MSA is discussed in the benchmarking study?
It's a good question. It's a 10-county MSA. MSAs are really based on a lot of things, but mainly commuting patterns. So it's really the level at which geographically we compete economically as a region with other regions across the country and other markets around the globe. So because that's the case, no part of our region can really get very far for very long on its own without the rest of the region coming along. So it's a good way to look at the whole of how our economy, how our education, how different things function on a daily basis to make sure we're not leaving any part of it behind and that we're really competing with all that we've got as a region.
Love it. Thank you, Matt. And you kind of referenced my next question a little bit before when you talked about how you might use it to make decisions for grant making. But I'm wondering, Gina and Avery, if you all have any insight in what you think the value of this data is, whether it's for nonprofit leaders, entrepreneurs, educators, decision makers, other funders. What's your perspective?
Yeah, personally, I think that for lack of better terms, well, never mind. I'm not going to use that term. I can use this data to go after grants, to fundraise, and to influence, but also reiterate what we already know to be true. Like, we know a lot of these things to be anecdotally true, but then to have like specific numbers and data to associate with it, that really helps reinforce it when we're going up higher up the chain and trying to scale our operations to be more impactful in the community.
The red button won't turn off. Okay, sorry. Oh, wait. Can we share? Apparently not. Okay. Well, after technical difficulties. So I think, similar to what Avery said, I think we know the story of most of our families that we serve. And so I think having the statistics to show and help to paint a picture of what is happening on a larger scale is really beneficial when we are talking to potential donors or funders about what true need looks like. And so I think that that's where studies like this are helpful. But at the same time, I think we need to make sure that we're still focused on solving problems and not just waiting for more data to continue to come out.
And I just want to piggyback on what they both just shared about the power of stories, because, I mean, when you think about it, like, a good story is halfway across town before a spreadsheet even gets out of bed. So, but the thing that's also true, though, is that a report like this, with as much data as it has, and I think Rob Moore from Scioto Analysis, who conducted this, noted that there are over 3,000 individual points of data, that they are our region's stories in the aggregate. And so they're there, and you get to ground truth and connect up to that data, and that's an important way to use this report.
I love that. And that dovetails really nicely into one of the things that was really top of mind for me, and I love the reference to of we know this anecdotally, and we think about Columbus in certain ways, right? We all have the story that we have told ourselves about Columbus and this region. The report talks about that we have economic strength in our community. And so Columbus's economic strength and relatively low cost of living really paint a positive picture of our region. But the reality is that maybe not all Columbus residents feel these benefits. I'm wondering if you all think about that and thinking about how you read the report and think about this data in the story of Columbus. How can we bridge the gap to ensure prosperity reaches all people and communities? And do you think the report helps illustrate where those biggest gaps currently are?
So yeah, I'll jump in. I think it does a great job of telling the story on a whole. I think that it's going to be our jobs to really connect some of these dots to really reinforce what the story is telling, right? Because Columbus is absolutely an opportunity city. There's plenty of great things happening, 4% unemployment, all those things. But the report specifically noted that for our peer cities, we rank number 2 for people living in poverty, like in Columbus right now. And then I'm looking at all of these. I had a hard time actually in some points of the report with not being like incensed because, again, knowing everything that I know to be true about this place, I'm also looking at all of these like peer cities, and then it's like median household income. And they have like white, Hispanic, Asian, and Black. Asian Americans are number 1 in like every market except for one. And then it's white, like we would assume. But literally in every market except for one, it's Black at the bottom. Everywhere you go. And here, like the difference between a white household and a Asian household and a black household is almost 2x, right? And then we add on like pay equity. Like I could really just go through and just rattle off all the bad stuff, but because it's important. Because if you got to see the compound effects. Like if we're talking, because one of the things we're going to talk about are the slower amount of small business starts that we have in our region. And a big part to do with that is if we know that a lot of small businesses have to bootstrap, and especially minority-owned businesses have to bootstrap, let's just go with women. If women are making 83 cents on a dollar still in Columbus based on men, and women are going to bootstrap, they already are at 13 cents deficit to start the business, to start. And then our credit scores are going to be lower because our utilization is higher and yada, 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 on and on and on. But if we're trying to be impactful in how we interact with these populations, we have to be thinking more radically. We have to be seeing how all of these things are compounded, so we have to make some more targeted investments, some more big swings at some things. But I really hope that not just people like me, because it's not helpful if it's just people like me that use this data. Let me say that. But I hope that everybody who has a budget, who can affect policy and that kind of stuff, also use these stats, because these are people who live and breathe here in Columbus right now, who are living impoverished, like right now. Like 1 in 4 black people are living in poverty, and 1 in 2 Hispanic people are living in poverty in Columbus right now. So what are we going to do about it?
And I think the other important note is that many of those people who are living in poverty or right on the poverty line work for us, right? And then I think you also kind of dig in that, especially in the human services sector, where many of us are the social safety net, the way that we are all funded does not allow for most of us to pay a living wage and to keep up with the cost of living in our community. So I think there are major disparities between those who are continuing to thrive in this community and then those who are still being left behind. And many of those who are being left behind are marginalized, and they don't have access to resources to help even build a bridge out of poverty any longer. And with policy not keeping up with need, we are seeing the effects of that even more in something just as simple as childcare. If you are very, very poor, you can access childcare. If you are very, very wealthy, you can access childcare. But for that vast majority in between, it is extremely difficult to access childcare. And on top of it, childcare really is the foundation of our workforce. So if we are not allowing childcare to be that kind of base for where children can be during the day so their parents can work, our economy cannot keep up with where it's going and how many people need to be employed.
Excellent. Go
Sorry, I
ahead.
have a real quick question. So I saw the 2 stats, like about the amount of money we spend on housing and transportation, but I don't know if there was the same about childcare, because if you add childcare into it, you'll see our households are spending probably 70% of their household income on those 3 items, and then still having to do other things, including feeding themselves, because we didn't include food. So I don't know if you know how much it costs, but that's just crazy.
Yeah, so on average per child here in Columbus, families are spending, depending on the age of the child, anywhere between $12,000 and $14,000 a year on average per child. So, for example, my neighbor who has 3 children under the age of 5 is spending $63,000 this year on childcare. And that's a real number, right? So, and I think for those of us, and what that is covering doesn't actually even mean that that company is breaking even. It doesn't mean that they can pay their staff a living wage. There are so many pieces of the childcare system that are broken in our community that it is definitely adding stress to households in a way that I think is most of the time not documented.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, Matt, and thank you, Gina and Avery, for that thought. Do you feel like you saw that missing middle in this data set? Do you hear about that population in particular?
Yeah, I think it pops up in several different indicators in a variety of different ways. One that comes to mind is that we had one of the highest rates of poverty across these regions for people who are working, which again is like another thing that like shouldn't be true, right? And I think one of the most valuable things about this report and this data, the comprehensive nature of it, is that yeah, we can see some areas of strength in our region. We can even see some trends that are headed in the right direction if the point in time data isn't where we want it. But in a lot of cases, it leaves us with nowhere to hide. When you see some of this data as starkly as it is, and you see some of those gaps, you see how other regions are maybe doing better on areas where we should be as well. It leaves us with nowhere to hide and leaves us asking more questions, which I think is a big point.
Yeah, absolutely. More questions. I think the story, for sure. I love the way you described that, Gina, that childcare is the base of the workforce, and that's a story. I will say, too, as someone who had to pay childcare, that's an average. There are many people paying more than that, too. So digging in a little bit, too, Matt, you told us that this isn't the first time we've done this study. And so scanning back, looking at some of the other findings, 2019, again, pre-pandemic, we showed that Columbus ranked then near the bottom for the percentage of small and very small businesses. Avery, I know you took a deep dive there. Has that trend continued? And welcome others to add there, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know that COVID just exacerbated it for many small businesses. So the ones who did make it, they probably are still open. And I have a whole bunch of, I call them COVID babies, like not children, obviously, but they're businesses born in 2020 and 2021. People who were feeling revenue insecure or who are trying to take some things into their own hands. And so we do see some starts in those respects, but their revenues are going to be a lot lower and more stagnant and just flat, actually. But yeah, no, unfortunately it is. It was good. No, it's not. I'm sorry. But the trick is, one of the things that we have to remember is Columbus is a capital city. We're a government stronghold, education stronghold, and when we're looking at our percentages of where people work, 20% of people work for the government, 20% work for healthcare and education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but if you think about the types of small businesses that could be related to those, it's not that many that could be related to those. So we have a lot of service-based businesses and that kind of thing, but that it does actually make sense. But when we're looking at the population, like a lot of our people work for small businesses. It's just a lot of, it's like less than 10% of our firms are considered small.
Awesome. So what can we do? I mean, you gave us some idea of why we might be lagging in the small business density, but I'm wondering if you have ideas about policies or support systems that could boost that environment. She's revving up. She's got a lot of ideas.
I have all the ideas, and Chris and I had a long conversation about this one day. I'm like, give me some money, I'll do a whole bunch of stuff. Like, seriously though, like I have a lot of ideas, but because of just the nature of the organizations I run and my past and how I've gotten here so far, typically, whether you're for-profit or not for-profit, Black women organizations are vastly underfunded comparatively, right? So number one, fund us better. Not just, I'm just looking at you guys because you're sitting here. But I think that we do need to do that. We need to be thinking also about some more ideas when we could think about tying together education with entrepreneurship. We do have like some programs within some of the school districts, et cetera. Like I know the Downtown High School has an entrepreneurship program, but when if we're thinking about trying to get people on a path to livable wages, it's not going to just be college. A lot of people are not going to go to post-secondary. So what kind of things could we be doing to be encouraging more young people to start businesses and encouraging more young people to try to take over other people's businesses when people are trying to retire and, you know, keep the wealth growing rather than, in a lot of cases, people don't have something to hand over. And so the business is just gone. And so at very least, invest more. And we got to just think more creatively about how we can encourage more business starts.
I can just add that in childcare, right, the majority of small business owners, which a childcare is considered a small business in many regards, but we also have our home providers. And our home providers are running businesses in their homes, providing care for children. And so, again, as we're seeing this system kind of have these, points in time where it's a make it or break it, what we're seeing is that many of those women are having to either choose to retire early or they are choosing to go out of business because they can no longer make a living providing care for children because it is not funded in the correct ways and or families cannot afford it. And so it makes it out of reach. And we did see, our organization has a family home child care provider program. We've now worked with over 100 family home child care providers in Columbus in a 2-year program, which helps them if they want to get licensed, if they want to move into providing PFCC or become Step Up to Quality rated. We're supporting those women in their small businesses, but when there isn't any money to close the gap for them, there have been women who have had to choose because of a health event, an accident, the death of a child. They've had to leave childcare because they can no longer make a living that supports their family.
I have an idea just off of that, right? So, but no, seriously, like, so I haven't talked about it, but I run a CDFI, our community development financial institution called Freedom Equity. We provide microloans to Black-owned businesses in Central Ohio, and we have done a couple of child cares. But one of the things that we need is, and I didn't know that program existed, and so that's like a logical partnership right there. So whomever's listening, we have a pilot program. No, but seriously, because think about that, like, because we just funded a business who was literally going through that process. She was home-based, had found a brick and mortar, but she didn't have the cash flow she needed to do the outfitting of the thing. So we funded that part of her business for her, and she's gonna be able to hire 5 people. She can instantly like quadruple her enrollment, et cetera, et cetera. But we gotta have both the technical assistance and expertise as well as the capital.
I think, and maybe Matt, you can add to this, but both of you have added the characters in the story. I'll keep that going. Where you've said women, you've talked about Black people and other minoritized populations. I'm wondering what barriers are specific to these populations, as you're thinking about entrepreneurship, and I'm wondering if there are local initiatives that you think would be specific to those populations. What ideas do you have there? Not put you on the spot for pilot program number 2, but you all have really honed in on that as a population to focus on. I'm curious.
Yeah, we do know that nationally, starting with Black women are one of the largest growing sectors of new business starts nationally, but we don't have that same stat here. And one thing that we do have here is that Black women tend to be heads of their household. Single Black women tend to be heads of their household in Columbus. They also tend to overpopulate the homeless shelters and the family shelters in Columbus, and are also housing insecure. And so we are looking at that group because if you think about how many people a Black woman is typically touching in her orbit, you can have like some exponential impact. So we already have a program that we are in partnership with the Columbus Minority Business Assistance Center called Accelerate Her, which specifically targets Black women and looks at their whole life, right? Their business, but also what else is going on? How are your kids? How's your house? Do you need food? Like all the things. But it needs to scale. There's so many Black women there's so many women in Columbus that could benefit from that type of program. But then there are also some accelerators like Women's CEO, and there's some I know that Women's SBA, Mary McCarthy and Keena Smith at Women's CEO, they have their own accelerators, right? But they too need to be able to scale. They can only do but so many people per cohort. And we do need to just kind of I'm not talking about anybody specifically, but I feel like we dump a lot of money into things sometimes. And if we thought a little bit and targeted some of these investments into people who are already doing scalable outfits, we would have a lot of cool impact. And then great things will happen.
I think we have some things here that just need more fuel and more support. But I went back and looked at the whole series on this topic of small businesses, and I'm as interested in a handful of other communities as I am about things that we could, do more with here. Columbus has been in the bottom 5 the entire series, except for the very first one, in which it was in the bottom 6. So we haven't exactly been exemplary, but Chicago, San Diego, Portland, Providence, and Minneapolis have all been in the top 5 throughout the entire series. And so to me, I want to know how we can continue to fuel and support and scale the things that we have locally, but also, what lessons can we learn from some of these other communities that seem to have it figured out?
If you need help with that, Avery and I will go to San Diego for you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
we're ready. We're ready.
We can leave right after this.
Perfect time of year. Perfect.
Just throwing it out there. They have sunshine there, unlike here. But I mean, I think, Autumn, for us, why are we focused on women? Why are we focused on moms? It really goes back to our founding in 1887. So we found I think it was 13 women as well. There's something about 13 women in this community that can do great things. Right. So they found that women were having to go to work in the community and weren't able to afford the best of care. So they started, our organization. And even still today, 85% of the women that we serve are African American women who are female heads of household. And so our entire community is based on those women and how those women need support and need to be, kind of in their time of need sometimes supported and propped up in more than just ways around childcare. So we do things where we are providing food, we provide assistance for their children if they are having issues developmentally. We're bringing all of those services inside the building so moms don't have to take off work, because most of them are in low-wage, hourly wage jobs where if they say to their provider, I need to leave 3 days a week to take my child to therapy, they will lose that job. So I think we as a community have a lot of the pieces in place. We just need to be willing sometimes, I think, as a community to step out and do the thing that may not be popular or that may not be what is considered by some what we should be doing at the time, but we have everything we need to solve problems. We just need to be willing to take those steps. And there are people who are willing to take the steps, but sometimes don't have the capital to take the steps. So anonymously, you could give money to all of us, and we will take the steps forward for you that you don't want to take. So there's ways to do this, I promise.
Yes, I think, and I won't editorialize here too much, but it's also taking the steps to scale, but then also having the courage to stop doing things that aren't working too. So I think that is very thoughtful. I will say, shifting us a little bit, there were some highlights in the study. So that story of Columbus that we all have in our mind, the places that we love to live, work, and raise our families, had some shining stars. In Columbus, we love our libraries, and we really use them. We're so fortunate to have Columbus Metropolitan Library as an anchor in so many of our communities, especially across that region that was studied. Connected to that, as we think about libraries as an anchor, we also had a really high, Columbus has a higher pre-K enrollment compared to the peer cities. In fact, it's in the top 5, and that trend is very positive. So mainly, thanks to people like Gina for doing that work and getting 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled. We know that's been a focus for our community for a while. I'm wondering, what are we doing right? So we see that in the data, but I actually am very curious, are we performing well for all kids in that data?
No, we are not. So again, I think that the numbers we need to remember reflect this larger region. And so in the larger region, there are definitely bright points of where kids are thriving, where they are getting their needs met, and where they are enrolled in programs that are leading to success in kindergarten. In Columbus, we are not seeing that same trend. So when our children enter into school here, only 34.6% of them are ready for kindergarten. So that's an extremely low number, first, but second, for our brown and black children, those numbers are even lower. So for Hispanic children, only 14.1% of them are going into kindergarten ready, and only, I wrote this down, 21.8% of our African American children. So we are not getting it right for everyone. 54.8% of white children go to kindergarten ready. And so you can see just in that huge disparity, even though that's only, even still on the aggregate, we're just not doing well at all in Columbus. And access is also something where we are limited. Our city and our county have done amazing things, but they are not scaled in a way that gives broad reaching access to children who really need access to early learning and childcare.
Thank you. I'm wondering what might be that ideal model. So how could we get it right with early education access in our entire region?
we need to do the hard thing. We need a levy. We are the only major metropolitan city in Ohio that does not fund a broad scale pre-K program. So there's Pre for Cle in Cleveland. There's the program in Cincinnati. Toledo has one. Dayton has one. We are the only major metropolitan community in the state of Ohio that does not have a large scale pre-K program that is essentially available to all. That's what we need here. So it's probably a levy, but I would say that that levy goes even further, that we need a human services levy that may or may not combine childcare and early learning in it. But for us to continue to be able to support at being second in the highest rates of poverty and growing exponentially, the safety net services that are in our community have to be funded so that we can continue to take on the amount of people that the system actually is serving.
Do others have ideas? What could we do to expand access for all children?
The only thing that comes to mind based on what you just said is even the way that you framed it. Yes, we need to fund things that we know are going to work, and we need to fund like proactive programming and success, not just let's fund getting along, like let's fund just hanging in there, let's fund staying in the worst 5 on whatever it is. So I think we want to fund success and not just fund prosperity and access and opportunity, and not just failure.
Excellent. Well, I think those of you who, again, have looked at the report, you'll know that there's a lot of data. What is it, Matt? 300,000 metrics, lots of data. For me, looking at it, what I found really valuable, and Avery started with this maybe earlier too, is to really think about how these metrics interact with each other. We don't live our lives only in segments. And so I'm curious if anything surprised you all about the findings, and maybe if there's an area that you had hoped would have had more progress since the last time the study was done. Any surprises?
I don't know if public health folks would be surprised by this, but where we landed on a number of those, and I'm going to throw in traffic fatalities as well, because we were not in a favorable ranking on that as well, and I think that's part of public health.
Absolutely.
It's not for lack of having preeminent healthcare institutions and providers in our community. It's really about access to those. And research suggests that that's really even only a quarter or so of overall health outcomes, right? So we have the social determinants of health that speak to so many other aspects of what determines our health outcomes. So, you know, again, I think we can look at other communities that are doing better. If you want to know what it would look like for us to cut our infant mortality rate in half, for example, it's a handful of the communities that are in this study. San Diego, I think we really need to plan a trip. They're in the top. Austin, Portland, San Diego, and if you wanted to cut it by even more than half, San Jose. And to your question, Autumn, about kind of the intersections, I also took a look at educational attainment across the same timeline. You want to know the communities that are in the top 5 in educational attainment? It's the ones that are in the top 5 in infant mortality in terms of the lowest infant mortality rate, which again speaks to the social determinants of health and the many factors that contribute to the outcomes that we're chasing. There's connections between a lot of these indicators and how they play out in people's lives.
Absolutely. Anything surprising for you, Avery?
No. I'm sorry. When I tell you, it made me so mad. And it did take me a little bit to get to it because we got it when it first came out. And then just because of everything that's going on. So then I'm reading it and I'm like, man, we're doing so great as a region with unemployment, like 4%. But then, and like there's so many great things. And there's so many cool things that happen here. But all the things that are not cool are so pronounced. And for me, when especially thinking about what just happened at the beginning of this month and what's about to happen over the next 4 years. And if we're already this far behind in some of this stuff, I'm like petrified. And I can't even gloss over it. I was not even going to talk about it. I was trying my best not to even go there because it is that bad. And I'm not being facetious at all. And there are a lot of us in our city, in our metro area, who are going to be impacted in a negative way. And there are a lot of people here in our metro area who could help avoid a lot of the pain and chaos that's about to occur. And so I just hope that you do. Yeah.
Thank you. I have so many questions up here on this sheet, and we're never going to get to all of them. So I want to just say thank you, everyone. It is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions, and we'll move to questions from our live stream audience and in-person audiences in just a few minutes. So if you have a question, please make your way over to the back of the room, to the microphone. If you're joining us online, please type your questions into the chat. But before we do that, I do want to ask one more question to our panelists, and I might cheat and make it actually 2 questions. But when you think about this report, does it show our community moving in the right direction? And in the case that it does or it doesn't, I'm wondering if you could tell us, if you could equip Central Ohio with one key advantage over its peers, what would you give our region and why?
Well, that's $1 million question. So I think Columbus is doing a lot of things right for a small portion of its community, and there's only a portion of the community that is prospering from what is happening. And so I think what we need to do as a community is come to that realization, and we need to understand, everyone needs to have deep understanding that what is happening here is not good for everyone, and it's not having a positive impact on everyone. And so I feel like that may be what I would equip us with, is the understanding and knowledge that this growth is really only benefiting one part of the population here, and that we strategically, as community leaders and those who care about this community, need to make sure that when we make decisions, we're making them in a way that is equitable and that is allowing others to thrive, and not just one slice of the pie gets bigger and bigger, I think is what I would equip us with.
So I think we're headed in the right direction on a number of key areas. But to riff off of what Gina just shared, and the example I would give for that actually is that in the personal prosperity section, on every one of those indicators, we are trending in the right direction overall. But I think we need to not rest satisfied with overall numbers, and to borrow a word from my teenager, be okay with being mid. I love it. Which we have kind of that's a Columbus thing that we need to get over, is being okay with being mid on some stuff, right? But I think we need to make sure that we're not giving up and not calling it when an overall number looks good for now. I think we need to stay at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I'll say I know specifically Columbus has a lot of resources. They are very fragmented, and they're not accessible to everybody. There's plenty of capital. Everybody just can't grab it. So if we could do a better job of actually making sure that the things get to where they need to go, and not believe, nobody ever thought the trickle down anything was going to work. So I don't understand. We're like a AAA rated city, bonded city. We got a very large public institution, right? Like educational, medical, all the things. And so if we put together 1% of their budgets collectively, we could solve a lot of the problems that we're talking about here right now. It's just going to take leadership from institutions like the partnership, the city, all of us, to make sure that happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And now Doug Buchanan with CMC is curating questions from the live stream audience. It looks like we have a line of folks in the back. Doug, what's our first question?
Autumn, thank you very much. Thank you to today's panelists. Great conversation today. Please do join me here at the microphone. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. If you're watching online, please do type your questions into the chat. Great questions at CMC always have 2 things in common. They take less than 30 seconds to ask, and they end with what punctuation mark? A question mark. That's right. Questions end with a question mark. This question for Gina. Gina, you mentioned the need for a human services levy. I'm sure Michael Corey's ears are burning right now. What would that include?
Oh, I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for this, but my board chair is here, so it's fine. So what it would include, so it needs to include the safety net service organizations in our community, but be fairly comprehensive in what it's covering. So if you look at the makeup of the Human Services Chamber, there's over 200 organizations that make up the chamber, and they range really from everything, including education, all the way to housing and everything in between, addiction services, so on and so on. So the levy would be a pretty comprehensive levy that would give and allow sustainable funding to those Human Services Chambers members who are really making, in combination with their current funding model and the things that they're doing, it would make up that gap of funding that we are all seeing that is needed to continue to do the services at the high level, and also then take on the more people that we know that are coming into our community that will need these services going forward.
Hello, my question is for Avery. So I had actually written this down before you went there earlier, but as we've seen earlier this month, over half of the country seems to not see humanity across all ethnicities and races, and data and facts don't seem to get through. So how do we as individuals, sort of boots on the ground, really change hearts and minds to help them see the facts that, you know, there are still huge discrepancies based on race that are very real, and it has not reversed the other way?
I don't know that I'm the right person to answer this question, but just because like the data has been ever present, right? And it's unfortunately, I think we just talked about this a little bit, I think there are gonna be a lot of hard questions that are happening all around the country next week at Thanksgiving, when people are coming together for the first time and having conversations about what just occurred. And you guys, I could say this way, you guys are gonna have to hold your families accountable, because my family is cool. Like, my mom's here, I know who she voted for. I was in a room on Friday night, and they were talking about, I was the only person of color in the room, and we're talking about the election, and one of the things was like, they were just so distraught about the data, and about the demographic breakdown, about how people voted, and they're like, and one lady was like, you know, if you're white and I don't know you, you probably voted for Donald Trump. And she was white, and because of the breakdown. And then I was like, I'm sorry guys, as far as I'm concerned, I can't quite call it with y'all, because like the numbers call it. I was like, every other one of you in this room could have voted for Donald Trump, but it doesn't matter, because at this point the votes are done, it's over. So the question is, knowing what we know now, with the decisions that are being made for these cabinet choices and these appointments and all the things that are coming, it is imperative that we solidify and fortify these civil rights and some of these social impact programs that we know have been working. Because it's economy, it's the economy at the end of the day. It's like, so if you want to get to somebody at their hearts and minds, let's talk about the economy. If people are making more money, they're going to be draining less on emergency care. We're going to have to pay for less subsidies, et cetera, et cetera. Like, go to the bucket, go to their wallet if you have to, because obviously they're not going to go based on humanity of basic humans.
And yes. And I think what I've been reminded of in thinking about this data in light of the election is, yes, we need to think about the gravity of it, the impact of it, but I don't think anybody in this room and nobody in this region can afford to throw our hands up on any one of these issues. And I think if we look back at some of these things like infant mortality and some of our public health things, our racial gap in poverty, these things have lasted longer than the last, just count it. I mean, it goes across all kinds of administrations, and so we can't give up on any of this stuff, and we can't get discouraged, even though it's hard.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to, real quick. Our city, our metro area has been majority democratically led for a whole bunch of years. So we can't necessarily tie what just happened nationally to what's been happening here. So we can't let ourselves off the hook. Like, oh my God, it wasn't us. Because we've been doing it. Like, it's just been Columbus. So.
And Avery, I'll just add to that I think what's sometimes hard for us in Columbus, and it takes us always remembering that we live in a state where most of the people who make the decisions are not the people who live in this city. And there's been a thing that says, I'm not from Ohio, I'm from Columbus, right? Because we, right? That's been going around. I don't know that I think it's trending, but but it is that the way that we think and the way that we do things here is very different than what it looks like on the broader scale in our state. And because of the way voting works in Ohio, again, this was a more like, we can take the national election, yes, but we had those same decisions made for us in our election here in the state of Ohio. So we have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves because so many of us believe what the rest of us believe. It's going to require us to each of us taking care of each other here locally, because we are also not going to get the support from the state because we are mostly blue, but some a little bit purple, right? So that is, I think, another really important thing, that so many decisions are made for the city of Columbus, not by the people in the city of Columbus.
Thank you. We have about 9 minutes left and lots of questions, so we'll try to get through as many as we can.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Fox, President of Community Strategy Partners. And my question is about the sort of stark, to me anyway, difference between last week's conversation on this same report and this week's conversation. And I know they were divided on purpose. But how do we make sure that the conversation across all these issues is happening with everybody, the economic development people and the people trying to shore up the social services and the safety net? Because it seems to me we've been having this bifurcated conversation for a long time. Thank you.
I think we got more into the weeds this week, and we got more into people's lives and stories this week than we did last week, which was, a much more macro conversation. But I think it's a great question, Kathy, and I take some comfort in the fact that we have been talking about housing more in the context of economic development lately, and the Regional Housing Coalition launching yesterday is a sign that we are starting to realize that we can't outgrow our economy beyond our housing market. We can't. That's not going to last, and it's not going to be sustainable. So I think we're starting to see those connections and starting to think about these things in tandem. We just need to keep going.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. It's really excellent. My name's Emily Shriver. I'm the CEO of the Matriots, and we work to get women elected to office. It's kind of a combining of Kathy's question and the previous question. This survey went 10 counties wide, and we know that there are discrepancies between urban, rural, and suburban governments and voters. Dr. Jin, you mentioned that we need a levy here in Columbus around human services. What can we do collectively around the 10-county region with our public office holders to try to move this forward? And not just dollars, because dollars isn't the only thing that's going to energize this. There need to be policies that are better. So I'm personally thinking about women who are running for office. What kind of platform could they stand on that they're going to change or implement as they're running?
Well, my short answer was we just need to elect more women to office. And the Matrix does a wonderful job of educating women in a way that they can prepare themselves to run for office. But I think it's still not socially acceptable for women to run for office. I don't know why, but it's not. And I think if we're looking at what roles can women stand on when it comes to running for office, I think it has to be somehow, especially in our rural and suburban communities, we have to talk about the early education and the diversity of businesses and all of the other things, not in a way that is about taking power away, but how can power be distributed to all in a place where things are more rich, vibrant, diverse, etc. That it's about adding to these higher levels of economic prosperity, not taking anything away from someone. And I think that is, I think we've all been caught in saying, if you are this, then you are not this, or you can't belong to both. And I think that's where we have to change our language some. And this is in the nonprofit sector in total. We just have to change the language and how we talk to people so that it's resonating more on a personal level than just picking one side or the other.
Thank you. We've got 5 minutes left. We'll try to get to a couple more quick questions. Dave Dixon, watching online, asks, when you consider the report findings which present interrelated challenges, especially those facing the underserved, where do you see the biggest opportunity to affect positive change?
If we could get some more dollars into the hands of entities that are funding small businesses, I think that is a very smart, strategic way to get more money into households, specifically because small businesses are more likely to pay livable wages, and we're also more likely to hire people that look like ourselves. So if you're trying to really get some specific money to a specific population, that is a way to do it. And I said before, capital is abundant. It is, but it's not always accessible. And so just making sure that we can get these dollars unrestricted and out to the community in meaningful ways, tax credits, plus actual loans, and yes, grants, I think, actually, we would have some major improvements.
I think we've been talking about it all along here. Children, investing in children because it's the future of our community, and investing in women because they tend to care about our future and our community more consistently and more regularly in all the things that they do.
Hi, I'm Dalia Leith here with the American Heart Association. So earlier someone said, I'm not sure who, focusing on good stories. And so as a part of the American Heart Association, we focus a lot on the social determinants of health and, bringing that to our large funders. So how can we, because as a Black woman in public health, I understand how I'm disproportionately affected by the social determinants of health. How can we, though, tell this story to funders and things of that nature? Because, we say the same, song and dance over and over again, but how can we dig deeper to tell the greater story of what's going on in the community?
I can take this. Unfortunately, the disadvantaged most often have to tell the story about their disadvantage and try to convince people with power to take it away. So I challenge the people people in power to people in power. You know these things to be self-evident. You know these things to be true. You can take a look at the whole section when it says that 1 in 3 people in Columbus have diabetes, 2 in 3 people are overweight or obese. There are specific things in there, and there are specific ways that we can invest. And there's a whole group of health systems all across the country that are doing, it's like anchor health systems. They're getting health systems like Ohio State to put aside 1% of their budget to community investment because it's cheaper than the extra care they got to do when people walk into the emergency room. So stuff like that would be super meaningful.
And I think continue to tell the stories about how the thing is not always the thing, right? We talked about infant mortality and educational attainment. I would say with a lot of our public health, if you have a transportation system that's really dependent on cars and not moving our bodies, there's connections all over. So just look for them and keep telling those stories.
I think that's a perfect way to end, Matt, and thank you. Everyone, I really wish we had more time. If half of the audience, you know me, it was very hard for me not to answer these questions, but happy to chat about it after. But I've gotten the signal and some jumping jacks from Doug in the back, so we're going to turn it back over to Susan Merriman, Susan, for closing remarks. Thank you.
Well, I hope you found today's conversation informative and motivating, and that we'll take our motivation out and do good things with that. Thank you to the presenting sponsor of this terrific two-part series, the Columbus Foundation, and to the sponsor of today's forum, the American Electric Power Foundation. We are also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center of Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, J. Avery Frost, Dr. Ginn, and Matt Martin, and our host, of course, Autumn Glover. So we're going to take a break for the Thanksgiving holiday next week, but please make plans to join us now for our next forum on December 4th, right here, which is about the Columbus eviction rates heading in the wrong direction. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.